Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Back with some Halloween cards. Finally got this edited. It's been a crazy couple weeks, but anywho. I had bought this Pretty Pink Posh Halloween Wreath stamp set. It's so cute. Had to have it. So I'm going to make multiple cards with it. My first three are kind of the same, just a very simple take with this. So I lined up the wreath in my MISTI, and the first inking I'm using black cardstock, and then I used my anti-static powder tool. This is the rabbit hole one that everyone's been raving about. I've shown it in a couple of videos so far. I've been really happy with it. It's really nice. So I used my anti-static powder tool. I inked up the stamp with clear embossing ink, and then I am going to coat all of this with detail white embossing powder, tap off the excess, melt that with my heat tool, and then while this stamp is in my MISTI, I'm going to stamp it onto other cardstocks as well, because simple designs like this, regardless of whether you're going to do Halloween or anything, you can do with anything. Like, it just works. So my next one, I'm stamping onto some of Simon's smooth white cardstock. This one, I'm just inking up with Simon's Intense Black ink. I'm only going to stamp it once. Setting that aside, I will deal with that one later. The other two, I'm going to stamp on to Neenah Desert Storm, one of my faves. So this one, I'm stamping with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. So stamp it onto there. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my final piece of smooth white cardstock, just stamping it with Nocturne ink. Because these ones, I'm not planning on doing any coloring. I thought I'd go more kind of clean and simple with some splatter, you know? So I've got like sort of a black, white, and craft color scheme with the addition of a little bit of gold because I couldn't resist. So my three first backgrounds, I'm going to add the splatter to. So the first one is the black background with the white heat embossing. So I put it in my splat box, and then I'm just using some Ranger Picket Fence white paint and my fan brush. I am a fan of the fan brush. I really like it for splatter. I'm completely converted. I really like how you just get more, I don't know, you just get more splatter than with just a regular paintbrush. So I like the fan brush. So I splattered that background, set it aside to dry. My second background, I'm using my Gonzai Tombi Starry Colors. And I added a little bit too much water to this, so I'm like swirling it around to try and really get a more intense gold, because like, way too much water. But when it dries out, like, you know, the water will evaporate, the pigment will still be there, so whatever. But yeah, swirled this up again with my fan brush that I cleaned between the white paint and this. So once I was happy with it, splatter some of that gold fabulousness onto the white cardstock background. And then again, clean my brush. And then I'm going to splatter the Desert Storm background. And this one I'm going to use my Black Soot distress paint. And like I always say, when you're working with distress paints, FYI, they are permanent when dry. So as soon as I'm done working with all of this, I will wash out my brush, wipe off my palette, etc. because I don't want to ruin anything, etc. So set those backgrounds aside to dry. And then I used the Trick or Treat script wafer dies from Pretty Pink Posh. And I had stacked layers of white cardstock. With one of the other ones, I also used Desert Storm. And then this one, I'm going to top with some matte gold cardstock because, like I said, I had to bring in that little touch of gold. It's just fabulous. So I'm using just my craft tacky glue. This is the bottle that I have a fine metal tip added to, and I always link to this next to the bottle of glue. All I did, I just ordered the little pack of metal tips. It comes, I think, as a pack of 2. And I just screwed one on to my craft tacky bottle. I didn't have to do anything fancy. I just stuck it on there, and it works great. I'm really happy with it. So this is my detail bottle, and then I have my regular bottle with just the tip it comes with, you know? So I like this for really finicky little things. I didn't necessarily need it for these wafer dies, but it's nice to get that little thinner amount of glue for detail stuff. So I topped these die cuts. Like I said, I'd stacked them with the white cardstock. So there's like 2 or 3 layers of white, and then the gold on top. So it's got that dimension that I love. I can't not have the dimension when it comes to word wafer dies. And then the dots for the actual word trick, like for the eye, those are set, like I set those aside, and I will show, like I used to do that all the time, and I've talked about this in other videos too. I'm kind of a broken record, but I used to fiddle and, you know, stack them and like try and mess around with these teeny little pieces until I figured out it's so much easier. Set them aside. And I have to make a point of setting them aside because those little tiny pieces just disappear. They just, you know, because they're little. So they're set aside at the moment, and I'm just adhering all of these die cuts to the different backgrounds. So I have the craft die cuts, I think on the white. I have them sitting right here. I think I used the craft outline on the white. Yes. And then I did just white stack die cuts on the craft, and then on this black one, of course, I did the gold. So I just kind of started from the bottom and just kind of adhered them in the center-ish of the wreath. And I had die cut these panels, like after the splatter was all dry, I had die cut them with one of the waffle flower rectangle wafer dies just to make them smaller than my A2 card base. So I've got my sentiment adhered, and then I've got all the little dots for the eye, and this is just the easiest way. I wish I had figured this out after, like, who knows how much of my life I wasted stacking little teeny die cuts and like fiddling with them, when this is so quick and easy because you just adhere them directly to the project. So dot of glue, little cardstock piece, dot of glue, little cardstock piece. And I just use my little embellishment wand to, you know, pick it up, stick it in place, done. So much easier. So there's all my card fronts. And then as a little companion sentiment, I heat embossed the little Happy Halloween sentiment from that same Halloween wreath set onto some Desert Storm and some black cardstock. And I did, you know, white heat embossing on a couple and gold heat embossing on one, again, just to kind of tie it all together. So I trimmed those down with my guillotine trimmer. And then I just adhered these to each of the card fronts with some thin 3D foam squares. So again, just gives it that little something. These are definitely cards that you could do like tons of, you know, if you're mass producing or whatever, regardless of whether you're mixing it up like this and doing like several different iterations of it. Or you could just do one, whatever works. So I mixed up the card bases as well, again, just to give everything that little extra something. So I've got, you know, a black cardstock base, a Desert Storm cardstock base, a white cardstock base. And this entire time I left that wreath stamp in my MISTI because it's also going to come in handy with the final card, which I will get to. So it's all in place, still centered, you know, for everything. So then I can stamp the insides of my cards. And I just used Simon's Cobblestone ink because that's one of my favorites to go with Desert Storm. And it just worked also on the white cardstock. So I stamped that on the Desert Storm, stamped that on the white cardstock base, and then I had just a piece of white cardstock that I stamped this onto that I will trim down because I'm going to use that on the inside of the black cardstock base so that it just makes life easier. Sometimes I'll add a lighter piece of cardstock or a white piece of cardstock to a dark card base. Sometimes I don't. Again, it just depends on my mood because I can just write. Like, I love having like a black cardstock base and then I'll just write to the recipient like with a gel pen because, you know, that looks really fun. But sometimes I'll do things like this and just add that little insert because it just makes life easier. So whatever suits your mood, your fancy, whatever you want to do. But yeah, for this one, I just trimmed down that piece of cardstock that I'd stamped and adhered it to the inside. And that finished off the 3 more basic cards. So for my 4th card, I wanted to create a shaker because of course I got the coordinating die set when I bought the stamp set. So this is the one that I had stamped with Simon's Intense Black ink onto Simon's just smooth white cardstock. And then I did some very simple, very basic Copic coloring. I didn't do anything fancy, like basically a 2-color blend with the exception of these. I used dark grays for all the black areas. For this, I used 3 because I found the 2 that I had chosen. I had C7 and C4 and I was like, ooh, that's not going to blend very nicely. So pulled in some C5 there to get things to blend a little bit better. And I did super speed this up in editing again because my coloring is not this fast. And also I super sped it up because I didn't realize, I apologize, I still had autofocus set on my camera. So that's why it's going in and out of focus because it's like trying to focus on my hand, trying to focus on the marker, trying to focus on the background. And as always, when I'm coloring, I'm just kind of in the zone and not looking at my camera monitor to see that, yeah, I didn't have it set the way it should have been. So anywho, kept the coloring simple, kind of went with my basic colors, you know, got my purple, orange, yellow, some green, and then I had sort of a reddish pink kind of a color. And then I decided, I was like, I need like pink, not just reddish pink. So pulled those out too, just to add to everything. And I just went along and just kind of filled everything in. Like it's a simple, you know, little images. And I decided to make the little like suckers kind of a pinwheel of rainbow colors, because why not? So I didn't do any blending. I just added the colors basically in rainbow order, you know, pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and filled them in that way. And then this is a little trick I've picked up from Yana Smakula. She's done this in her videos, and I love how it looks. It's a little nerve-wracking doing this. But I put it back in my MISTI, and I inked up the Wreath stamp that was still in place with that Nocturne ink and stamped it, and you get that intense black outline again. But Nocturne ink isn't Copic friendly. So I did all the coloring and then stamped it that second time, and I love how it looks. I need to do that more often. So I did all that, and then I die cut this with the coordinating die. And normally you could just create a shaker. Simple. You know, back it with acetate, pop it up with some foam tape. You got this cute little wreath shaker. It's perfect. Like it's all set up for you. But I wanted to go an extra step and make it a shaker / window. So to do that, I took a piece of white cardstock. I traced the center of the wreath. And then I used just a circle die to cut my window. And then I lined this up onto my black cardstock base and used that all lined up to use a slightly smaller circle wafer die and tape that in place. And then I'm going to open this up, this card base. I'm kind of making sure everything is lined up. So open up my card base, die cut that. So now I have a window to the inside of my card. And then I have another piece of white cardstock that I centered inside my card base. And then I used the window to trace a circle with a pencil, just to give me a visual. At this point, I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to do this, but then I figured out the best way to do this because I wanted to add some ink blending. So in the end, I didn't need the pencil circle, but I'm going to erase it. What I ended up doing is flipping over the cardstock, the white cardstock I cut the window from. I flipped that over so the back is facing out, and I just taped this to that white cardstock. So now I'm going to erase that little circle window. And I'm basically going to use this like a stencil. So it's taped into place. This is where this, you know, window is going to show. So I've got that taped in place, and I'm going to use some purple inks. And thankfully I tested this one first. I forget which one. I think this was like shaded lilac. Pretty sure. It was too blue. So thankfully I tested that on scrap cardstock first because it wasn't the right color. So I grabbed milled lavender distress ink, and I'm going to blend that over top of this circle. So just a light blend. I don't need anything too intense. I just thought it'd be nice to have this color, and I just wanted to bring more of that purple into the equation. So I blended that milled lavender first with a blending brush, and then I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of wilted violet. Not a lot, because wilted violet's a pretty dark color, so I'm literally barely touching the ink pad with my blending brush, but just kind of blending that into the milled lavender just to get it more of the color I wanted. And then once I was happy with that, I'm going to very carefully remove this tape. I don't want to tear anything because I'm going to still use both of these pieces. The one with the blended circle is going to go on the inside of the card, and then the one that I used upside down is actually going to go on the front. So I've got all that done. I'm going to tape this into place. Hopefully this all makes sense. Showing it is kind of easier than explaining it, really. So I tape that in place just to make sure before adhering it, and then close my card, put it into my MISTI. So this is exactly how it will, that piece on the inside is going to adhere. So everything's lined up, and I'm going to line up this Trick or Treat sentiment from that same Halloween wreath stamp set, because this sentiment, of course, was designed to like fit right in the middle of there. So I lined that up, got everything centered, and then I'm going to stamp that onto this inside piece with that Nocturne ink. And I'm going to ink it up and stamp it a couple times to make it, intense and black. Made sure it was dry. And then to create my actual shaker window element, I've got some just acetate here. And I'm actually just going to use those circle dies just to give me sort of a visual guide. So I'm going to use the circle dies and just a fine tipped Sharpie to trace that out, because me eyeballing a circle is not going to happen. So I used circle wafer dies and just made sure they were smaller than the outer edge of the wreath, but bigger than the inner edge, and used my fine tipped Sharpie, traced that around, and I did 2 pieces with this. So once I had that done, I'm just going to trim around the Sharpie points with my scissors. And I'm not worried about like the Sharpie show, because it's not going to show, when everything's adhered. So, and I use my big Tim Holtz tonic shears for this. Highly recommend these scissors. I've mentioned this before, but they're just, and especially with cutting acetate, they're great for that, because they have that really fine, like serrated edge, so they don't slip around. If you know what I mean. Like if you've ever like tried to cut circles on acetate with regular scissors, your scissors just kind of want to go all over the place, or at least mine do. But these, I was like, oh, they cut like butter. Such good scissors. Anyway, so now I've got my circles. So to adhere the first circle of acetate to the back of my wreath, I'm using a good strong adhesive. And I like using things like a score tape or a red line tape, anything like that, as my adhesive of choice, because it really adheres well to acetate. So I just use really thin score tape, put that around the like inner perimeter of this little wreath, peeled off the backing, and then I can stick my first piece of acetate to that, the back of the wreath. And then to create the shaker, I'm just going to use my little Derice foam strips, just something thin and narrow. And I'm not going to double anything up. What I plan on using for the shaker bits are really thin. I had also thought of using, because Pretty Pink Posh released, and I bought them, of course. They had like those little clay shaker bits. I was going to use those, but the stars ended up winning out. So I didn't need to make this any thicker. Otherwise, I would have doubled up the foam tape to give it that thickness. So I peeled the backing off my little foam strips, so that way it just makes them pliable, so I can just easily bend it around, and making sure to butt all the ends up together so that nothing falls out. So once I've created my like barrier with the foam tape, I'm going to fill this with just some star confetti, because like I said, the stars went out. They're pretty, and they're holographic and catch the light, and love. So just spray. I didn't put a ton because I don't want too much, because I want to be able to see the sentiment, obviously. And then I backed this with the other circle of acetate, and that creates my clear shaker, so you can see through all the way, hence me creating this window. Like I said, you could make a much simpler shaker, like just make the shaker. You don't have to fiddle with like windows to the inside of the card, but if you want to do something like this, it'd be fun. And if you do, tag me. I love seeing what you guys create when you're inspired by things I do. It's so much fun. So anywho, all this is done. So now it's just a matter of adhering. So this is the one I'd used as a like mask, basically. And like I said, I just flipped it around and adhered it back to the card base, centered all of that, and then adhered the inner piece to the inside of the card. So right now I've just got, kind of a basic card with a window to the inside with that little bit of blending, the purple blending and the sentiment. And then to adhere my shaker wreath element, I put more score tape just around the outer edges of that second piece of acetate. And when I adhere this into place, parts of the adhesive and everything, all the like the ugly bits, are going to show through to the inside of the card, which I'll show in a second. Which normally, like, that doesn't honestly bother me that much. It's like, I don't really care. However, I figured out a really simple way to cover it up, so just keep watching. So yeah, you can kind of see the bits of foam tape, and it's like, it's not so pretty. Like, I honestly wouldn't care, but all I did was die cut that wreath from some black cardstock, and I'm just going to adhere it to the inside of the card. And it makes everything look more seamless, more clean. This is one of those few little moments where I'm like, I just, yay me for thinking of this, because like I said, usually I just wouldn't bother. But this was simple. So I just added a really thin line of adhesive, and then while the adhesive is still wet, I could, move it around to make sure it's lined up with the front and the back and everything's good. And that finished it off, just made it cleaner, simpler, cuter, whatever. And yeah, this card added that little happy Halloween sentiment to this one as well. And that finished it off. So these cards were really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've got my 3 more, simple kind of basic ones with this craft gold, white, black combo. You guys know I love black, white, and gold is like my thing, but then add some Desert Storm into it and it's like, oh, I like a lot. Because I literally have a playlist on my YouTube channel of black, gold, and white cards because you guys know I love it. That's like my go-to. So I've got those. And then I've got my little shaker window, which is super fun. It's got its little shaker bits. Can't not play with it because shaker bits are amazing. So yeah, really fun, really simple. Hope you guys enjoyed. And like I said, I will have links to everything I used, all my tools, all my supplies, all the fun things. Those will be linked in the description box below the video. And I will also link to my blog post, because in my blog post, I put all the pictures. I have picture links to everything. Way more easier to navigate if you are interested. That's always linked directly below as well to make everything easier for you guys. So you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, for thumbs upping, commenting, all of it. I very much appreciate all of the support. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.